Welcome, my friends, to the bonus episodes of Inside the Minds of Authors. Today, the talented Kathleen Gomez is going to narrate for us the first 2 chapters in my very first book, Intern. This is the book that changed my life and gave me the courage to follow my dreams. I hope you enjoy it.
Death's Intern by D.C. Gomez. Chapter 1. Friday night and I was living the dream. Yeah, right. I had cleaned the same 3 tables at least 15 times in the last 3 hours at Abuelita's. Abuelita's was a small, more like hole-in-the-wall, Tex-Mex restaurant in Texarkana, Texas. Of all the places I had ever dreamed of living and had moved to, staying there was beyond me. To make things even more confusing, Texarkana had a twin city, Texarkana, Arkansas. I guess the founders weren't very creative with the name selection, but who was I to judge? Compared to most major cities, Texarkana was a tiny dot on the map. For the locals, it was the largest city within a 60-mile radius in any direction. It was by accident that I'd found it. Located on the northeast tip of Texas, it was in the middle of everything and near nowhere. I was sure my godmother would love this. I'd promised myself that I would never follow in her footsteps of wandering like a nomad. Now here I was in my 5th town in less than 6 months. The good news was that I had managed to stay here the longest, a whole 3 months. I was probably brain dead. I had moved to Texas in the middle of summer. With the temperatures hitting over 90 degrees and with over 90% humidity, I was surprised I hadn't melted. My curiosity in learning everything about the king of ragtime was now extinguished. I was sure I understood why Mr. Joplin had left. Why hadn't I just read Wikipedia? According to the calendar, fall was 6 days away and the weather was still suffocating. Isis, are you listening to me? Oops. I had blanked out Abuelita's voice from the kitchen. Abuelita had named the place after herself. More accurately, she had used her nickname. In other words, the only thing she was after her husband and daughter died was a grandmother. She embraced it and became a grandmother to the world. Her place was open to everyone, and a wide variety of people patronized it. Abuelita was probably in her late 60s and tall, around 5'11", with a solid body. I was a couple of inches shorter, and it was odd to have a woman taller than me in this area. She was still strong and beautiful, with her silver hair. That shiny silver hair was the only indication of her age. She had been blessed with genes that aged in slow motion, like most Latinas. I'm sorry, Abuelita, I was distracted. I sucked at lying, so no need to even try. With what? We haven't had a soul in hours. Not even our regulars came in. Start getting the place ready for tomorrow. No need to waste time. Might as well close early. I was speechless. In the 3 months I had been working there, Abuelita had never closed early. Granted, it was already 9 p.m. and we normally closed at 11. So it wasn't that early, but without customers, the cleanup was done. Closing usually took at least an hour. I wasn't planning on arguing with Abuelita. She was a very eccentric woman. I was sure she and my godmother would have bonded instantly. I really needed to call her. She was the only family I had. The dining area of Abuelita's had 3 tables with 4 chairs each. 2 of the tables were by the large window at the front of the restaurant. The register area doubled as a bar, with 6 stools at the dining side. I took the chair by the window with a stack of forks, knives, and spoons. I wasn't in any hurry. There was plenty of silverware wrapped in napkins already, since no one had come in. Abuelita's faced Highway 82 past Walmart and the other Mexican restaurant headed towards Nash. Normally I saw high school kids driving around. Tonight even the highway was a ghost area, a bit creepy for my taste. It was probably a blessing it was empty because Angelo was missing. Angelito was Abuelita's grandson and the other staff member on weekends with me. The only thing angelic about that boy was his name. He went through more girls than most people went through underwear. In his mind, he was a ladies' man, and unfortunately for the ladies, he was hot. At 21, he was over 6 feet tall and weighed maybe around 180 pounds, with a great complexion and incredible hazel eyes. The one great thing about Angelito was that he lived with his grandmother. He was a spoiled boy, but he adored his grandma. If Abuelita told him she needed him, he would change his plans for her. I could have passed for his older sister. Angelito and Abuelita were of Mexican descent, but looked European. I could have passed for anything, from Italian to even Middle Eastern. My parents died when I was little, and my gypsy godmother wasn't sure of their nationalities. I could be anything with my long, thick black hair and mocha complexion. That could place me anywhere in the world. For most of my life, I'd been described as exotic. I guess it was a better way of saying outcast. It didn't help that my parents had named me Isis. Isis Black. In the age of terrorists, I had the worst name on the planet. At times I wondered what kind of parents I had who would trust their only daughter to a woman like my godmother. Don't get me wrong, my godmother was a beautiful woman with an incredibly caring soul. She was also a little rebel with a complete disregard for authority. Maybe my subconscious was rebelling against my upbringing when I joined the military. I was sure my godmother would have been proud if I had joined a band or run away with the circus. I kind of did both by joining the 82nd Airborne's band. Oh, there it was again, that same weird Mustang. That was the 5th time that it had driven by tonight. Hard to miss a greenish-yellow car. It looked almost sick. Why would anyone buy a car like that? Instead of tinted windows, the car had an almost mirror-like quality. Of course, I could hear its engines roaring from inside. Around 10 o'clock, just on cue, Bob showed up. Bob was a veteran. He was also homeless as far as I knew. He had served in the First Gulf War. We joked that we had served in the same sandpit just decades apart. Bob was in his late 40s with sandy blonde hair and deep green eyes. In his younger days, he had probably been very handsome. Now he rarely smiled, and most of the time he was paranoid. Bob was also the one person I called a friend. My war stories made sense to him. I ran behind the bar to the big window between the dining area and the kitchen. Abuelita, Bob is here. May I take my break now? Of course, Isis. We're still empty. Here's Bob's plate. At least I can count on Bob. Abuelita handed me a large plate of carnitas with rice and beans for Bob. According to Abuelita, Bob was a creature of habit. For the last 3 years, he had been coming in at exactly 10 o'clock. Bob ate the same pork meal every Friday night and said very little. Bob did odd jobs around the restaurant for Abuelita. He had once stopped a few kids from robbing her. Ever since, Bob was the unofficial night guard of the place. He made sure Abuelita locked up in peace, and in return, Abuelita made sure he had a hot meal each night. I took Bob his plate and brought quesadillas for myself. Unlike Bob, I would change my mind about dinner at least 5 times before ordering. Luckily for me, Abuelita's quesadillas were the best in town. It was pretty hard to mess up tortillas and cheese. I loved Abuelita's food, since she had a special menu for non-meat eaters. Hey, Bob, ready for dinner? Bob was looking around the place with concern. I followed his gaze, but couldn't see anything wrong. I took a seat on the picnic bench Abuelita had outside. After several long minutes, Bob joined me. Isis, any trouble tonight? Bob sounded worried. It's been a cemetery around here all day, I replied, between mouthfuls of food. How could I be hungry? I hadn't done a single thing all day. Don't joke about those things. Death walks the night. Bob was intense at times, but tonight it was even more dramatic. Death walks the night. Was Bob drunk? Okay, according to Bob, he had quit drinking years ago, but that was just odd. Bob, it's just a figure of speech. Nobody came in all night, including Death. I was aiming for funny and clever. Bob didn't even blink. Isis, make sure you go directly home tonight. It's not right tonight. Bob was staring at me with those piercing sea-green eyes. It's going to be hard to clear my busy schedule, but for you, I'll do it. I think he missed the sarcasm in my voice because he visibly relaxed and started eating his food. Oh, yeah, Angelito didn't come in today. Bob arched an eyebrow at me. I swallowed quickly and proceeded to explain before Bob could go full assault squad in search of Angelito. Nothing major. Abuelita says he has a new girlfriend. He met her this week, I guess. You ever wondered where he finds all those girls? Texarkana has fewer than 100,000 people when you combine the Texas and Arkansas sides. Most people are either related by blood or by marriage. How is he not dead for messing with the wrong family? Wow, that was the longest speech Bob had ever given all at once. Angelito's wild life must really have been puzzling Bob for him to say that much. I was nice and didn't point out how he had used death to describe Angelito's potential future. I didn't need another lecture. According to him, he doesn't lie and he doesn't make any promises he can't keep, so nobody's ever mad at him. I'm 25 and I haven't met a 21-year-old boy who didn't lie about himself. I didn't have the best track record with men my age, so I was probably not a great judge of character. You sound a little jaded there. Bob was very talkative today. I didn't think Bob was that good at reading people. Or maybe I just needed to work on not being transparent. Thank you, Captain Obvious. I added a glare for good measure. Any time, Grasshopper. Bob actually smiled at me. Maybe my dad was a little like Bob. Focused, but not taking himself too seriously. Bob was suffering from terrible spells of PTSD, so he couldn't hold down a job. PTSD was the new term the government was using to describe what most returning vets were going through, post-traumatic stress disorder. According to Bob, it was hard to take yourself too seriously when you were struggling. Bob finished his food and started to look around the place. At the same moment, the pale Mustang drove by. I was staring east on 82 after it while Bob turned to face me. What's wrong? He had that worried tone again. Oh, nothing. I've been seeing that car driving around here tonight. I started yawning. Slow nights were so painful. At the end of the day, you ended up tired and with nothing to show for it. Anything suspicious about it? Now Bob was in full paranoid mode. Nothing really. Just an odd color. Okay, we're closing early, so I need to hurry. I left with the empty plates before Bob could ask me more questions. I walked directly into the kitchen with the plates. The kitchen area was immaculate. Abuelita ran a tight ship, and tonight she was ready to go. I washed the plates and forks while Abuelita finished putting pots away. Okay, Isis, you can take off. Abuelita didn't even turn when she said it. I was ready for bed, but didn't want to sound too excited. Are you sure? I can help you lock up. I was really praying she would say no, but I would stay if she needed me. I'm good, child. Besides, Bob is doing his rounds. I'm sure I'll be okay. She smiled when she said that. Bob was very efficient. Thank you, Abuelita. Good night. I dried my hands and gave her a kiss on the cheek on my way out. Good night, Isis, she said as I ran out the door. Good night, Bob, I yelled at the night. There were no buildings near the little restaurant, so I knew the sound would travel. My minivan was parked in its usual place, the spot furthest from the restaurant. Abuelita liked her paying customers to have front row parking. The minivan was old and beat up, and it had once been midnight blue. Now it was just a faded blue. My godmother had given it to me, and I had nicknamed it the Whale. I wasn't complaining. The Whale saved me on gas, and I could pack my whole life into it. On top of that, it was paid for. I opened the door and was blasted by the heat that was still trapped inside. How could it be in the high 80s in September? This night, I was ready to go home to my small apartment on Summerhill Road. Chapter 2. Did I mention that everything I owned fit into the Whale? That included everything in my one-bedroom apartment. It wasn't in one of those fancy complexes in town, but for $400 a month I wasn't complaining. Compared to my last apartment in Washington Heights in New York, this was luxury. I owned a small futon that doubled as my bed and sofa. A wicker table sat in the middle with my books and sheet music. The bedroom was actually my studio where my sacks hung out. Most of my clothes were in plastic storage containers from Walmart. The bathroom was next to the bedroom. A small hallway with appliances made the kitchen area. It was a good thing I didn't cook much because there was barely any room in the kitchen to walk around. I loved cooking, but it's too much trouble to cook just for one person. Most of my stuff had come from Walmart. I probably had an obsession with the supercenter, or, more accurately, I couldn't afford any other place. I spent way too much time wandering the store buying things I didn't need, like more books. The apartment had no curtains or even pictures on the wall. I never bothered with that stuff. I was never in one place long enough to settle. I had piles of books all over the apartment. They were neat and organized. I just refused to buy bookshelves. Those things were hard to move. On the positive side, everything was paid for, and I had no debt. Keeps things simple when you need to move in a hurry. There was a knock at my door. It was almost 11 and I had no friends. All of the people I knew I'd left at Abuelita's. Texarkana was a relatively safe city by my standards, but I wasn't too excited to get killed there. When it comes to crime rates, most people have a hard time looking at the big picture. For the natives, Texarkana was becoming too big and too dangerous. They wanted to keep the small town feel. When people know your name at the restaurant you frequent, you live in a small town, no matter what the natives believe. With that in mind, I grabbed my bat and walked to the door. "Who is it?" I tried to make my voice sound mean and menacing. Instead, I sounded like I had just swallowed a frog, just my luck. "I have a message from Brooklyn. Can we talk?" a female voice said. The voice had a slight accent, maybe European. She sounded friendly, but the Brooklyn part didn't make me feel any better. I'd left Brooklyn in a hurry. Besides my godmother, no one from that life knew where I was. "Isis, we can talk in private or we can do it this way. It's up to you." How did she know my name? I slowly opened the door with my left hand, keeping my right on the bat. I peered through the crack, trying to look mean. I'd heard stories that when death comes for you, your life flashes before your eyes. Well, that was a lie. My life didn't flash. Instead, everything froze. As I stared at the woman on my threshold, I knew I was seeing death. Don't get me wrong, I'm not talking about someone who was there to kill me. I was actually staring at Death herself, the Grim Reaper. Why Death was wearing very expensive designer suits and 4-inch heels was beyond me. For that matter, why Death was beautiful with curvaceous long body and silky brown hair, Can I come in now, or do you plan to just stare at me? There was mischief in her voice, and I couldn't help but feel a little bit sheepish. Sure, why not? If Death was at my door, there was no point in hiding. Do you know who I am? She strolled into the apartment and did a quick scan. She was wearing a light jacket over her suit. I guess Death doesn't feel heat because it was still too warm for all those layers even in September. Death. The word came out harsh even for me. That was all I was able to say. I was feeling nauseated. Not bad. May I? She pointed at the futon. I nodded. She slowly took a seat with grace I had only seen in Miss American pageants. I had a couple of folding chairs by the wall, but I was too shocked to move. Are you here to kill me? I found the courage to ask. Death raised an eyebrow and analyzed me. Sorry, dear, I'm not in the killing business. I'm more in the delivery one, so no, I'm here because we have some business to attend to. I was totally lost. What did delivery business mean, and why did I have business with Death? Ma'am, I'm sorry, but I'm not following you. Nobody could accuse me of not being polite. I was feeling pretty brave here. I had spoken a whole sentence to Death. Do you remember Brooklyn, March 9th? Oh, was she serious? I was so dead. This was getting worse by the minute. Unfortunately, I can't forget it. There was no need to lie to this woman, or being, or whatever she was. I had an ongoing countdown in my head starting on that day. It had been 6 months and 6 days exactly. Good. Tell me what happened. She leaned back and waited. I wasn't sure she was breathing. Excuse me, what? The horror on my face was probably showing because Death smiled very gently at me. Relax, dear. I want to hear your side of the story, so start from the moment you got to the party, and try not to leave anything out, okay? The voice was soothing but firm. She was leaving no room for interpretation. She wanted the truth, and she wanted it now. I took a breath and then exhaled. My friend Tamara invited me to a party at one of her friends. I was planning to leave the following week. I wasn't adjusting and couldn't find work. I was planning a road trip. Tamara was one of the few friends I had up there, and she actually wanted me to stay. I'd been out of the military for almost 2 months at that time, and I was already miserable. We made it to the party around 10 p.m., and the place was packed. It was on the 7th floor of an apartment building in Brooklyn. The residents had moved out, but hadn't returned the keys. Music was loud, and you couldn't walk without brushing against people. Couples were making out everywhere. The smell of weed was thick in the air, and everyone looked drunk. I found myself getting sweaty hands. My heart rate increased, and I knew I was having a panic attack. I was feeling claustrophobic, and my senses were in overdrive. I had lost Tamara as soon as we walked in. I tried to head for the door, but people kept grabbing and pulling at my clothes. I eventually made my way to the back and found a fire escape. I just wanted to get some fresh air before I broke down in the middle of the crowd. I swear I never meant to hurt anyone. I never told anyone that story. My palms were sweating again, and tears were rolling down my cheeks. What happened next? Death was so still it was overwhelming. I wasn't sure why she'd asked. By the look on her face, she already knew the answer. The window was open, so I climbed out. Unfortunately, when I was trying to get up, I accidentally knocked someone down. It all happened so fast. At the time, I had no idea what I pushed. I tried to catch it. It was followed by a loud scream. By the time I made it to the ledge, there was a body on the ground. Please believe me. It was an accident. I went back inside and rushed back down. I wasn't sure how safe the fire escape was. The apartment was even more crowded. It took me longer than I expected to get down, and when I got to the street, the body was gone. I was nervous. I knew I was rambling, but I couldn't stop talking or crying. I was trying to calm down while Death continued to analyze me. Is he dead? Unfortunately, dear, yes, he is. No human can survive a fall like that, and he is the reason I'm here. Death shifted her body. I had the full weight of her stare on me. The young man you killed was my intern. Your what? I was grateful I was standing because I was getting ready to bolt for the door. Relax, Isis, and please sit down before you faint. The statement was more of an order than a suggestion. Her demeanor was strong, and I felt as if I were in Death's house instead of mine. I pulled up one of the folding chairs and dropped myself down into it. This was so bad. It was hurting my head. So are you here to take revenge for your intern? That was all I was able to ask, very softly. I told you already, I'm not here to kill you. Death was getting annoyed, I could tell, but I wasn't really sure what to say. There are things worse than death. I had heard stories of pure damnation. That is very true, dear. Hopefully my proposal won't sound that bad. Death took a breath, not because she needed it, but for emphasis. With the loss of my intern, I'm in need of a new one. Since you killed him, the job is now yours. Say what? What job? Wait, what are you talking about? Death actually smiled at me. She was probably thinking I was mentally challenged. The rules are simple, dear. You killed my intern, and in turn you take his place. That is, if I find you an acceptable candidate. You passed. I was starting to feel like Tim Allen in the Santa Claus. Granted, I was sure Tim had a much better deal than mine. Rules? Who makes these rules? This is nuts! I was yelling and pacing in front of Death. I wasn't sure when I got up from my chair, but this was madness. You can call it cosmic law, an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, or just karma. Whatever you prefer. Unfortunately, that's the rule. I was getting ready to interrupt her when Death raised an index finger and I stopped moving, even breathing. I do believe in free will, dear. I don't want people working for me who don't want the job. But, before you decide, I want you to meet a few friends of mine. I had an incredulous look on my face. Death smiled gently at me. I wasn't sure whether I was supposed to say anything. Death continued. You might actually enjoy the fringe benefits of the job. Even more, you might find purpose again. With all due respect, Death, please don't act like you know me. You know nothing about what I want or need. I hated when my elders tried to put me in their boxes. I didn't care that it was Death making the assumptions. She just kept giving me that infuriating smile. Whatever you say, Isis. Please have a seat. Death's voice was even gentler, but it left no room for argument. I felt myself drawn to the chair again. You will meet with my friends tonight, and you will have 3 days to decide if you will take the job. The boys will fill you in on the details. What makes you so sure I'll take this job? Why was I arguing with Death? Oh, yeah. It was that horrible streak in me that hated to be controlled. Death got up from the futon and smoothed down her suit. She looked around my apartment, taking inventory. I felt offended. Things have been arranged, dear. Trust me, it will be your choice if you come to work with me, but I'm sure it's a much better offer than what you have right now." Death walked around the table and stood next to my chair. She smiled down at me, then went over and kissed my forehead. Before I could complain, I felt my body shutting down and I was slowly falling. In the blink of an eye, I blacked out.